Rob!
What's up, Ayana? How you feeling?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good now. We got this flood taken care of in the basement, so I'm okay now.
Your water heater exploded.
Yeah, it exploded. I was like, why does it feel like a sauna in the basement? And I'm like, man, I heard, tss, and then I saw all this water on the floor. And luckily, I just gone down there to check on some things. But these are just first world problems. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy that my family is well, and we got big news coming up in another 4 to 6 weeks, because I know Father's Day is tomorrow, but in 4 to 6 weeks I will officially be a father to a healthy baby boy.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about it. I'm actually, that's been the motivation. I've been trying to purge and to clean up, not just the community in terms of all the inadequacies that we've been experiencing, but really just trying to just get rid of stuff so we don't move and go to this next phase with a lot of old unnecessary energy.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for this next chapter in your life. You're in the middle of a chapter that maybe you didn't think was going to be a big chapter in your life, which is being on the front lines, as they're saying, of the pandemic. You're an emergency room physician in New York City. How are you feeling?
I'm actually feeling pretty good. I have a lot to live for. So so optimism is a must in this profession. I'll never forget the day that you and I met in was it May or June of 2016? I can't remember. I just know it was me and I met Reggie first, but we were talking about our workspace, and I said this is the quietest workspace I've ever been in my life, and we're talking about just rules and regulation. And so I think I've been accustomed to dealing with chaos, but you don't expect for chaos to be in existence 24/7, and that's kind of what's been going on with the pandemic, and then the recent assassinations, which have just really been kind of igniting and informing the rest of the world with what's been going on in the Black, Brown, and any marginalized community. But I'm feeling pretty good. I'm optimistic because I have to. Not because I want to. Sometimes I kind of want to sit and stare into space, but almost like the good Reverend Yearwood just said, he'd rather spend a lot of time raising his two boys and not thinking about racism. But because there are issues that are in existence with what's going on, are people directly being impacted by it? And if anyone has any special skill sets or unique skill sets, or has a way that they know that they can be of service, then we have to step up to the plate. We can't expect other people to solve our problems. Even though they may contribute to them, I still want to make sure that I am putting forth that most maximum effort. And I want to make sure that our circles are putting forth that effort.
Mm-hmm. So help us connect the dots between race and COVID and just all of the intertwined things that are going on now. What are you seeing about this? This situation is a web, right? It's not just one thing. Help us understand perspective what that looks like.
So I work in a Black hospital in a Black neighborhood, and our hospitals are considered safety net hospitals. We are a last resort for people who don't often have the resources that are required to care for themselves. When the news came out, I think it was probably maybe the third or the fourth week of the pandemic. It might have been like the end of March, first week or two in April. And there was a study in Chicago talking about the deaths related to COVID-19, and also in New Orleans, like how the African American community is dying at an alarming rate, more so than white communities who were infected with COVID-19. And some people were so surprised, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this exists. But for many of us who work in resource limited settings, we all know it's no surprise. We die at higher rates of heart disease, higher rates of intentional violence, higher rates of complications due to diabetes, kidney failure. And we see so many people without, and it has a direct impact on their overall health and well-being. Just the amount of people that are coming into our hospitals and our emergency departments for standard care. We're not even talking about just emergency care. We're talking about standard care because they didn't have access to a regular outpatient clinic. We see so many unnecessary deaths, and any death, without you being surrounded by your loved ones at some sort of ripe old age, and that can be variable depending on our habits and lifestyle. But any death, prematurely is an unnecessary and unwarranted death. But the reason why our death rates have been so high in our respective communities is because one, we have many pre-existing conditions that help compromise our immune system. If you are chronically stressed, that's going to compromise your ability to fight off infection. Stress itself is a normal response. If like some sort of a saber-toothed tiger, or if you're trying to catch a bus, you're trying to catch that B-38 bus going up Lafayette Avenue, and it ain't coming for a while. Probably. That's a fight or flight, I know you and I have taken that bus, Ayana. You and I grew up 2 blocks away from each other, and we've had to catch that bus many a day and stood outside in the cold for many a day. But that should be just a shortened time frame when you do that. It shouldn't have to be this chronic, ongoing response to stress because your environment is compromised, because you're trying to figure out how you're going to feed your family, because you're trying to figure out, is the place that I'm living in safe and sound? Am I going to be terrorized? I shouldn't say if I'm going to be terrorized. When am I going to be terrorized? It's not a matter of, do I have to navigate violence in my community? It's a matter of when am I going to have to navigate violence in our community. So these are ongoing things that we tend to experience at alarming rates. And yet, people are often surprised that our death rates due to COVID-19 are a lot higher. I have to give you a really big shout out in the sense that you have helped a lot of us connect the dots, looking at parallels with the environment and how that has an impact on our overall health and well-being. Right now, about 55% of the world lives in a city. In another 25, 30 years, it's going to be 68% of people living in some sort of urban setting, which means human population is going to encroach more on more rural environments, which means we're going to have more contact with animals that we probably wouldn't have come in contact with. We're also going to wind up having more people living in closer proximity to one another, which means the likelihood of us spreading some sort of infection, if we do have it, increases. I've worked in Haiti, and I remember right around post-earthquake, we had high rates of infection because people were living in these tent cities. Sanitation was poor, close proximity to one another, and people weren't just dying from injuries related to the quake, they were dying from issues related to the spread of infection because you had a compromised infrastructure. And all these different things tend to directly impact how well we live. And so because we're living in these more densely populated areas, the fight for resources becomes even greater. And anytime you start fighting for resources, you have that whole fight to maintain and be in positions of power. For some people, they're fighting to get to access power because they're trying to survive. So for those who are in positions of power, they're trying to fight to maintain that power. So you have this really major imbalance, all because of being compromised, because of inadequate resources. I think about where we live, where we grew up. We grew up in pre-gentrified Brooklyn. I live in Bed-Stuy right now, which is gentrifying, but you still see that sharp demarcation between the haves and the have-nots. And anytime you have that sharp demarcation, you're going to have increasing rates of conflict. And what we've seen, particularly in the emergency department, and most of my work that focuses on violence prevention and intervention, we see higher rates of unnecessary deaths due to conflict. A lot of that is sparked by resources, and a lot of that stuff has been linked to supremacy, which has been implemented in order for certain groups to maintain access to those resources.
Also, violence in communities and amongst police brutality linked to climate, to heat, to disasters. And so you have this happening on both ends, right? There's what we were talking about earlier this evening, which is having greater exposure to air pollution because of burning fossil fuels puts communities of color at a disproportionately high risk of respiratory issues, makes COVID susceptibility higher or the symptoms worse. And on the other side, you have heat and all these sort of increasingly unnatural disasters, which are a public health risk too. And we just saw that piece come out in the new research connecting heat to the health of children being born to Black women being much worse. You're getting a shout out in the comments that you're the best doctor in Brooklyn. That's probably true. Quite possibly true.
I got a great team. I got a great team that I work with. So I never do this stuff 100% and by myself. Although that's one of my patients. Really cool, amazing artist. So I got to give a shout out to K number 9. But you hit on something. I think about just the whole concept of heat. I'm a summer baby. I love the summer. I love the warmth. But I also snowboard, so I like being out in the mountains and I like enjoying the elements. However, the hottest days of the summer tend to be the days where we have the highest concentrations of interpersonal violence. And heat, especially when people are agitated, they can't keep cool. You don't think straight when you're not. At this state of homeostasis, our bodies and our environments like things, with proper balance. And when any of those things is out of whack, it can compromise things that, the things that we would normally do. And so climate change has a direct impact on not just our physical environment, but more so how we adapt and respond to the environment, which can compromise our ability to make more adequate decisions. When you're hot and complicated, you don't make great decisions. When you don't have enough to eat, and when you're constantly hungry, and we're not talking about an intentional fast, but even if you are, fasting, I know for people who fasted for Ramadan, the fast of Ramadan is recently over. Anybody who's done any of those fasts can tell you, during certain times, you are irritable, you aren't so comfortable. And just imagine if you didn't have access to all the things that were necessary and essential for your survival. How is that going to compromise your ability to function in a normal state? So there's so many of these things that are intertwined.
And then we have this context of COVID and people don't have air conditioning, and what does the cooling center look like in this context, and heat stroke, and New York City's trying really hard to get more people air conditioners and to defray their electricity bills for the summer. So that's a start. But I wanted to ask you, because we don't have much time, I want to talk to you forever, about KAVI, Brooklyn. So you are an ER doctor, but you also have done a lot of work in the community, supporting young people, helping them find alternative paths. Tell us about KAVI.
So KAVI itself is an organization that I founded, and I have to give a shout out to our amazing team and our even more amazing participants who've taken a major step in acknowledging that we need help as it relates to our own personal health and well-being, particularly revolving around conflict. But KAVI was started because of high rates of violence that we were seeing in the community. We're seeing high rates involving young people in the neighborhood I was living in. And, as an emergency physician, a lot of the work that we do is really a Band-Aid approach. I mean, we're there to keep people alive. That's the number one thing. But if people keep coming back in with the same problem over and over again, then that really indicates to us that we've never addressed that problem to begin with. And so with creating KAVI, which is a hospital, school, and community-based violence intervention and prevention program, we want to reframe this entire conversation around violence and trauma, helping provide support for patients who've been injured so that they don't come back for repeat injuries. About 40 to 50% will come back in with repeat injuries over a 5-year time frame. 20% are killed within 5 years after that initial injury. So we're talking about pretty high numbers that are freaking mind-blowing. But creating a space for people to be heard and to be acknowledged that there's an issue and that they have their own personal fears revolving around violence and trauma is really important. And we wanted to ensure that we created these safe spaces and be a resource for counseling services, advocacy, and overall support for patients and their families. In our school program, we work with more kids. We work with kids who are considered to be at risk, which is almost every kid that lives in not even just central Brooklyn, but in New York City, because of what we have to deal with, navigating neighborhoods, moving from one place that your safety may be compromised to another place where your sense of safety may be compromised. And we keep doing it. Our office and headquarters is at Kings County Hospital. But Kings County Hospital and SUNY Downstate Medical Center, both across the street from from one another, are the hospitals that we primarily work in. And we work with a series of different public schools around Brooklyn. P-Tech in downtown Brooklyn, and the Wingate High School campus, and Eagle Academy in Ocean Hill. So
when we met, I was just completely blown away by your work, because we grew up in the same neighborhood, and it was really violent in the 80s and 90s. There's still some violence in the community now, and you were just sick of seeing young people come in injured, and so you started KAVI, Kings Against Violence Initiative, to focus on that prevention piece. So you're sort of helping people when they get injured, but you're also trying to prevent violence, which I think is so beautiful. So for those who are watching, in the pinned comment, both Rob's Instagram and the one for KAVI Brooklyn. So please support KAVI. They're doing incredible work on a really lean budget. So, just give them heaps of money. And okay, I have two last quick questions. One, if racism didn't exist, what would you do with your time?
Oh, wow. That's a tough one. Actually, it's not tough. I would definitely spend a lot more time with my family, but I would have been a diplomat and traveled the world. I always wanted to. I love traveling. I love just immersing myself in different cultures and working in different parts of the world. But I would have probably done a lot more diplomacy, because all the health stuff that I see.
Piper is going to be an artist. Reggie would be in venture capital, and you would.
Wow. Oh, by the way, I got to give a shout out to Reggie Black. I got my poster. It came in the mail last night, so I'm excited to put that up.
I've got mine on this wall right here.
Oh man,
yeah. Black original.
Oh no, I'm definitely looking. Every time I feel like I have something important to say, and Reggie says something really important. He says, "Are you using your voice?" And I definitely would have used my voice, but I would have probably spent a lot more time working overseas, which is what I started doing earlier on. But my plan was never to do violence intervention. My plan was to do a global health fellowship and work in East Africa and continue building emergency systems. But because of what we were seeing when I was in Chicago, and then thinking about what was going on where we grew up in Brooklyn, and then particularly seeing patients that I had known or that I'd been connected to at some point in time coming in with injuries that were unnecessary, it's kind of like, all right, we got to do something different. It's cheaper. Prevention ain't sexy, but it's definitely a lot cheaper than taking care of patients. And so we had to use our voices, and really, it's not even just about the program, but making sure that we use our voices to really ignite much larger movements. I'm glad that you helped bring so many of us together today, so that we can connect the dots with environmentalism, social change, the need for creativity and design. How does voting have an impact on us being heard? But ultimately, it boils down to how do we portray ourselves, and how do we show the world and create a society that is ultimately at its best. And that's what we're here, and that's what we're dedicated to continuing to do.
I want to talk to you forever, but we have someone else who's coming on, Jason Ward. So I have one.
What's up, Jay?
One last question for you, which is there anyone you want to give a shout out to?
Oh, actually, I got to give a shout out to my wife and my folks who have been my biggest supporters My wife puts up a lot. I don't think I'm a difficult person, but she does know how much doing community work means to me. You know, this is something I've been doing my whole life, and my parents have always stood by me and encouraged me to do this stuff. I'm actually just following what they've done. So I'm hoping to pass the same stuff on to my son. But, you know, my family is amazing. I got to give a shout out to my KAVI Brooklyn family, my AUC family, and anyone who's involved with social change. So.
Okay, everyone, follow Rob. You scroll back in his feed, you'll get lots of snowboarding pictures. He's an amazing snowboarder. We're gonna go shred together one day. Black Avalanche is his snowboarding crew of black dudes. I'm so
I'm the Black Avalanche, but Black Ops is our crew.
Black Ops, okay, my bad. Black people ski and snowboard. Ski, snowboard. So follow KAVI, support their work, and thank you, Rob, for all you do. You're such a gem. I'm so excited you're going to be a dad.
Oh, no, thank you, Ayana. Best, keep motivating and keep inspiring. Thank you.
Okay, more soon.
Take care.